Welcome back to the Get More Smarter podcast. My name is Ian Silveri. My co-host Jason Bain today is actually up in Alaska trying to fix the salmon hatcheries that are going terribly wrong. So everybody wish Jason a lot of luck. This is a special interview-only episode where it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Michael Farrington, who is a fourth-generation Coloradan who grew up and lives in Commerce City and who is now running for the RTD Board. He lives there with his wife Kassidy in their Great Pyrenees mixed Zeus, which I guess is relevant because of all the Odyssey conversation that's going on these days. Mr. Farrington graduated from the University of Colorado Law School, where he focuses on land use, housing, and local government. When he was in law school, he worked in the Colorado's Governor's Office of Legal Counsel and served as the lead articles editor of the Colorado Environmental Law Journal. He now works with the Colorado cities and towns on government and land use issues, and before going to law school, he worked for Denver Public Schools. Michael's also a co-founder of YIMBY North Metro. We are aligned in that fight as well, a housing advocacy organization focused on building more homes and creating walkable, connected communities. Help us out down here in Lakewood. An actual transit rider himself, Michael's running for the RTD Board in District K, a seat that represents Brighton, Commerce City, and parts of Thornton. Michael Farrington, welcome to the Get More Smarter podcast.
Thank you so much, Ian. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. So, first of all, tell us why you're running for the RTD Board this November before I bore you with the details of how I used to ride to your district back in the day.
Awesome. Yeah, it comes down to very simply, Colorado has grown a bunch in population and its transit district has shrunk. Not geographically, it's actually increased, but the amount of service that we provide is smaller than it was just a few years ago. And it's especially smaller than it was 10 years ago. Commerce City, Brighton, and Thornton have all grown. They're all places with big growth, big development, and they're not getting the service they deserve. We passed things like fast tracks 20 years ago. They're not materializing. We need a leader who's focused on fixing those issues, who knows how to work with local governments and has that experience, but can also bring a fresh perspective, someone who can work well with folks across party lines. We don't need someone who's looking for kind of their next office. And so I kind of saw this moment as a chance to really run. It's an open seat, a chance to really run and make some change in my community at the level that impacts people the most, and that's the local level.
Right. I used to say the closer you are, the more local the government we're talking about, the closer they are to actually affecting your life. So you should care a lot about things like city council, school board, and RTD. So here's my Adams County RTD story. So when I first moved to Colorado back in 2006, 7, 8-ish, I was back and forth a little bit, but I landed here full-time in 2007. When I was out here visiting in 2006, I worked on a political campaign for a former state representative named Judy Solano. I was living in Boulder. She was running in your neck of the woods. And my first time ever using RTD, I'm from the East Coast. I'm from New Jersey and New York, where we have massive public transportation that I used to get around all the time, from when I was in college at Rutgers to when I worked in the city as an intern at MTV, and then to when I was living in Brooklyn before I finally moved out here. We were just back east and we used the MTA with both of my kids to get all over New York City. Sure. Didn't have a car. It was great. Very different story out here. So I was at the Table Mesa bus station waiting for my two buses that I would have to transfer in order to get to where I was going at 120th and Washington back then. I don't know what the routes are these days, but I would ride my bike from where I lived in 30th in Colorado up to the Table Mesa station, get on the bus. There was a guy there one day and the bus was very late. And I was like, what is the deal? Like, on the East Coast, they actually get pretty close to the timetable they say they're going to. And he said, you know what RTD stands for? And I said, what? Do you know what he said?
Reason to drive.
He sure did. And that joke stuck with me forever, and I understand why. Now, that was a long time ago, and I couldn't believe how hard it was and how long it took for me to get from Boulder to Adams County and all that stuff, but it hasn't exactly gotten better. I live in Lakewood, very close to the W Line station. And when I used to work downtown, my office was across the street from Union Station. It would take me 45 minutes of walking or riding the bike and then taking the light rail to get to my office. Whereas if I just drove, it would take me like 12 minutes. I enjoy books. I liked to work on the train. I'm a transit enthusiast by nature, but increasingly I just couldn't justify it. What do you say to people who are finding themselves in that situation with the services these days?
Yeah, I often say that there's kind of three unities when it comes to public transit, and that we have to win at least two. We have to be either cheaper, we have to be faster, or we have to be more enjoyable than taking your car. And for so many folks who live along the W or the N up in my neck of the woods, it's none of those things, right? It's not cheaper because you often have to pay for parking and then, a fairly cheap, but still a pass. It's not faster. It's much, much slower, right? And it's not more pleasant. Your car has nice air conditioning. There's no waiting in a hot station with no shade, no benches. And for me, that's the biggest thing. I don't think it makes sense to kind of come to voters and especially riders and go, yeah, I mean, listen to a podcast, read a book. The bus will be there 12 minutes late, but it's fine. That's okay. I don't think it's okay. And so for me, I think that's part of the reason I think we need riders on the board is I live right off the 104. And so I have to cross a highway. I have to cross a highway to take my bus that I take the most. And the most frustrating thing is there's a light right at the edge of my neighborhood that I could cross, but they haven't paved a crosswalk. There's no crosswalk there. And so I have to walk a block down and then cross the street and then come back to the bus stop if I want to, or I have to jaywalk.
Across the highway.
Maybe I'm a bit across the highway. Exactly. So maybe I'm a bit of goody two shoes, but I don't like to jaywalk across the highway. And every time I do that, I think there is no way someone who took public transit would design this station this way. It makes perfect sense if you're in a car and you're just kind of thinking about it and you're like, yeah, stop here. It makes sense from the planning brain. I went to law school and I do land use. And so I work with a lot of planners, and it makes sense from the planning brain that it's like, oh, well, this makes the most logistical sense to put it there. But you're forgetting that the people who are getting on the buses are people and they have to walk from somewhere, right?
And so I think that's appear out of whole cloth at the station.
Exactly.
Well, so you're running for District K on what appears to be a slate of candidates, and correct me if I'm wrong, who are running under the sort of banner to transform RTD. Well, yeah. Governor Polis and the legislature just kind of did that, but maybe not in the way you all wanted. What does transforming RTD look like to you? And then also, how do you feel about that structural change that was just made to the board last session?
Yeah, two great questions. The first one, I'm partnered up with a couple of candidates. We're not super formally a slate, but we've kind of created a joint label for candidates who are focused on the core issues of returning ridership as the North Star metric, who are focused on an RTD that views its goal as expanding ridership, expanding the agency. We are not a group that's going to see the agency sunset in our tenure. That is our goal. And I think so many directors think of that, and I don't think that's our goal. Our goal is to, when we're finished, we're going to have more ridership than we did when we were elected. That's kind of our goal. And the second one is, I had some experience working with Governor Polis and Senator Ball, and Senator Lindstedt actually really, I think, kicked a lot of this off. And of course, Senator Winter. A number of those folks kind of took a bite at it and tried to do a lot of things with RTD. I think, if I'm being very transparent, I think the bigger transformation to the agency will actually come from SB 25-161, the reform bill that passed last year, that gives RTD a lot of new abilities, but it also requires audits. We know that audits are really, really effective at rooting out issues, and I think that that's going to be a big change. Ultimately, my priorities was seeing an elected board remain. I do think the smaller board's going to be a big advantage. 15 people is a lot of people, especially when for both good and bad, everybody gets kind of a little tribal. Folks in Commerce City, my voters, and I represent Commerce City, and it's kind of hard to convince me that the Southwest Rail expansion really needs to be a priority. And the inverse is actually even more true. The two directors from Adams County have fought and argued for the N line to be finished for years and years and years. And the other 13 directors that the N line doesn't go near are kind of okay to let it languish. And and I think that shrinking that board to a 5 elected board and those 4 nominees that'll hopefully be thinking of things a little more holistically has a chance to really work out well for the agency.
So you're in favor of the change on the board and its membership, then, it sounds like.
I think I'm in support of shrinking the board. Yeah. I personally would have left, 7 of those seats elected personally, rather than 9, rather than 5. I maybe would have done it.
The governor appoints the other 2, right?
Yeah. So the 5 of us will be elected. And then 1 will be selected by Dr. Cog. 1 will be selected by, and then confirmed by the governor, kind of. And then 1 will be selected by the largest labor union, which is ATU 1001. They've endorsed me.
Right.
So it's kind of nice knowing that we've got an ally under the new board structure. And then those remaining two will be kind of expert nominees from the governor, experience in some field that's relevant. So, and we'll see what exactly that looks like.
And for listeners who are wondering who the fuck this Dr. Cog guy is, can you run those unfamiliar with the weird label we've given to the Denver Regional Council of Governments through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so local government brained. Dr. Cog is the Denver Regional Council of Governments. It is the metropolitan planning organization that kind of covers the Front Range. So it's a membership group. The voting members are elected officials in their kind of constituent cities. RTD actually does have a voting role on the board, so that's kind of a weird conflict a little bit. But the idea is that it will give local governments a little bit more of a say. And in practice, I think, in the political thought process was it will guarantee at least one local government insider on the RTD board.
Okay, somebody who actually, like we were saying about ridership, knows a local government really, really well and can hopefully provide that perspective as well. Well, RTD's been in the headlines a bit lately, and not for the greatest reasons. I'm going to read a few of these to you, and some of them are opinion. I'd like your reaction to the sort of package here. ABC 7, RTD could kill the free 16th Street shuttle and several rail lines under budget cut proposals. Denverite, RTD could kill the free 16th... Oh, it's the same article. Westminster Window, Westminster's beeline on the RTD budget chopping block. Diane Carmen writing for the Colorado Sun. RTD is a mess, but even discussing the elimination of the 16th Street shuttle is absurd. And from the Denver Post editorial board, mild bosses, RTD's leaders have their heads in the sand with a $200 million budget shortfall. What's your reaction to these headlines?
You know, I would be disingenuous to not admit that I wrote a guest column in the Westminster Window myself last week saying that the punt on Broncos ride is kind of shows RTD needs new leadership. And I think I stand by that now with even more context. I wrote that a little bit ago. Look, RTD has a budget crisis. That budget crisis is an outgrowth of that things are more expensive. Inflation's really bad. The war in Iran has led to higher gas prices, which we partially rely on. All of these things are very real impacts. But fundamentally, it comes down to leadership. For the last 5 or 6 years, we've had really poor, in my opinion, really poor leadership at the top in a number of those offices and from the board. We've made decisions to cut revenue in places that I don't think make sense to cut revenue. We've made decisions to make kind of big new expenditures in areas that I don't know if it makes as much sense to do those expenditures. Fundamentally, core products like our bus and rail system need to be protected. They need to be the dead last thing we do in cuts. Director Karen Banker has kind of put together a proposal that would minimize cuts and increase fares, a couple other things. Frankly, I support that. I think that having a bus that runs by you is more important than a bus that doesn't, right? I think if we cut all the bus service to a neighborhood and we go, well, the bus fares in Denver are still $2.25 is kind of an uncompelling argument for folks in Brighton, which I represent, that's going to lose under the 20% service cuts proposal. They'll lose the RX entirely. Folks in Brighton, a city of 60,000 people, will have virtually no bus, and they have no rail service as is. I think RTD has really lost its way by focusing on a lot of the wrong metrics. Our ridership is at 60 million riders a year. 2019, it was 100 million. Any job, you know this, any job, if I came to my boss and said, yeah, I know our metrics year over year are down 40% from 5 years ago, but actually we're killing it. I don't think that's true. And I don't think we should keep extending the contracts of the people who are responsible. And I don't think we should keep reelecting the leaders who are responsible for that, that disintegration.
What about the mall ride? I mean, I used to take this thing religiously. Yeah. It was a huge part of my Denver experience. Yeah, of course, because it takes you right to Civic Center and then you walk across the street and you're at work.
It's super nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I think either the mall ride was put in there to get a lot of press and to make sure the public was aware that RTD is struggling, or there are some people in leadership at RTD that are genuinely politically unfamiliar with the realities that wish exist. And the argument is, well, it doesn't make money. Well, yeah, of course it doesn't make money. It's free. It's in the name. Not all public services need to make money. We don't ask whether or not the Parks and Rec budget is generating revenue at a local government. That's ridiculous. The mall ride is one of the most beloved systems. It's one of the most recognizable systems. Every day I go on social media, on places like Threads or Twitter, where I see people who don't live here who are traveling in Colorado, and it's 4 pictures. It's one of the big blue whores. It's one of Red Rocks. It's a picture of the mall ride, and they're like, "Oh, it was so much fun getting to explore Denver this week." And I think that is such a core part of Denver's offering. And I don't live in Denver, but I think it's such a core part of Denver's offering for things like conferences and stuff, that the end line should not be on the chopping block. I think we should work closely with, and there's a possibility we need to work closely with the Downtown Denver Partnership or the mayor's office to find some support and funding. But ultimately, no, the free mall ride, or whatever it's called, free shuttle ride, is absolutely critical. It's one of our highest, most visible routes, and anything that gets RTD good PR is probably something we should maintain when we're not in a good PR moment, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, as an RTD board member facing the budget crisis that you labeled it earlier, I mean, what would you do? Increase fares, cut lines, something else? Like, what's the actual practical solution to this stuff?
Yeah, that's the absolute hardest question that I get asked. And I think it's the question that people should be asking the most of their directors. I am going to be frank in that I'm a yes and guy. I think that we're going to have to make some cuts. It's not realistic. It is not remotely realistic to assume that we can save $200 million without making some cuts. I personally would start with things like FlexRide. They're low ridership. They're fairly specialized. To me, that is not the core purpose of RTD, which is to provide transit options for the most number of people. Second of all, I do think a fare increase may be something we have to look at. Again, we have such low revenue. And then things like fare enforcement on the A line specifically, that's kind of my white whale in terms of lost revenue. We've made the decision, RTD's made the decision, that the A line is going to be $10 a rider. That's pretty steep, frankly.
Yeah.
It might be the only one
it's cheaper than an Uber to the airport.
It is, and it's much cheaper than parking at the airport, right?
Yes, it sure is.
But I think that we really need to look at, if there's a place for us to trial fare gates on the RTD network, I think that it's the A line, specifically at the airport. And I don't, to be clear, I actually think the vast majority of fare evaders on the A line are mistake folks. I think the A line is by far our highest ridership from folks who don't ride transit otherwise. They don't know that they're supposed to go find the stick and tap their phone on it. And I think that the same thing, you get off a plane and you're like, look at this train. How cool. I'm going to get on this train and go to Denver.
100%,
and they don't know they're supposed to buy a ticket. And it's frustrating. We've rolled out Tap to Ride, which is great. But these folks are not downloading an app, activating a ticket when they've just got to a new city. They've just gotten off the flight. They're stressed. They're thinking about dinner. I think that fare gates make it a lot easier. I look at WMATA in Washington, D.C. Metro as a great model for that. I think that that's a place we can raise a lot of revenue. And then I think that
I just got back from New York, like I was saying, and it's a no-brainer. You get your Omni card now, no longer a Metro card, or you tap your phone on the thing, and off you go. I mean, I had 2 kids in a stroller, and every single station had a little gate that I could walk through. Generally, there was a law enforcement officer or somebody there to make sure I was getting through okay, or that other people who didn't need the gate weren't using it. And I understand the sort of vibes against sort of broken windows theory.
Absolutely.
Successor policies, but I think I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think New York's a great model. DC's a great model. I think that the other thing is we can make it cheaper. We can keep fares lower when everyone's paying them, right? We already have a really robust fare discount program that I'm a huge supporter of. We have free fares for under 19. I support that as well. But man, it really makes sense for specifically on the trains. I don't think most people are avoiding paying their fares because they're dodging the fare. I don't think they know. I had a friend in political advocacy who was like a consultant in this, who met with me and they went, Michael, I'm going to be honest, I've ridden the N line hundreds of times. I have no idea how to pay a fare. And that's just, they started rioting during COVID. We didn't have much of a law enforcement presence, and that was a real issue. I think that folks who are hesitant about things like broken windows, like you've mentioned, is I point to cities like San Francisco. San Francisco had so many issues on their transportation system, which is known as BART, the Bay Area Transit System. And they did fare gates, and they expected the fare gates to recoup their costs in 8 years. They ended up recouping the cost in about 11 months because of maintenance savings.
Wow.
Because they had such a reduced problem from maintenance issues, folks breaking things, throwing things in the garbage, perhaps defecating. They saved so much on maintenance over time that they recouped those costs of those fare gates in 11 months. Now, Denver's situation is different. We don't have some of the social challenges that San Francisco does, thank goodness. But I think for things like the A-line, it's a place where it really makes sense to test it. So look at the revenue generation, do the next step. So those things. And then finally, we have a little fat we're going to need to trim. There's some roles in the central office. There's some ways that we go about things in the central office that I don't think make sense. I don't think it makes sense to be doing these promotional bus wraps for kind of every celebration, Disability Heritage Month, Chicano Heritage Month, July 4th, the holidays. Those cost, tens of thousands of dollars per month for those. I don't feel good about knowing that there's a cute bus going around when there is one less bus in communities that really need it.
Right, you'd rather have
so
another law firm wrap
would.
it than do the expense from the
I really
from the
would.
coffers.
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
Frank Azar and I are not that close, but if Frank Azar will give me money to run one more bus, he can do the 6-7.
He can call it the strong arm
whatever
line.
he wants.
Let him go.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds great.
Exactly. We'll rename a rail of his choice. We'll rename it the strong arm line. If he'd so like. And I do think that that's where we just need to look at those partnerships, see where it makes sense to generate more revenue. Every one of these issues is a revenue and a cost issue. We should cut costs where we can, but to me, I would always rather raise revenue when possible to avoid cuts to services people use than kind of the inverse.
Well, so let's do a little dreaming then. Let's say you and the rest of the Transform RTD non-slate folks all win this November.
Thanks.
and in 28 as well, and you've got full control sort of the board with you and your colleagues under this new model. What are the first things that you do to actually accomplish what you were talking about?
That's incredible. That's a great question. So much of politics is so negative. It's so fun to actually be able to think about something kind of positive. I think the first thing is we're in the middle of something called the COA process, where we kind of it's the whole agreement under which RTD operates. It's a big project. We've brought Jarrett Walker, who wrote Human Transit, in to do that project. They're doing it right now. My board will be the one who actually votes on it next year. And I think that's a big part of it. I think that the decisions we're going to make are we're going to hire a new CEO. Deborah Johnson, the current GM CEO, is exiting sometime next year. I believe she said she's going to leave in March or April. Well, we'll have to take a look. But we're going to make the decision on who the next CEO is. That's going to be a major decision. I don't think we need another Deborah Johnson or Phil Washington. I think we need to go a different direction. And then it also looks like really kind of expanding and looking at, all right, we're going to finish the N line, we're going to finish the B line, whether we do it independently or through the FRPR project. I think that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's largely up to voters in November. And then I think we can start dreaming about what's next. The G line stops one station short of Golden. We could extend that line one station for practically nothing in transit capital expenditures cost. And we could connect that to a huge community of young people who don't own cars and like to go to downtown Denver, right? So I think that's our big priority.
It's Colorado School of Mines.
Colorado School of Mines in Mines. Yeah.
And what does COA stand for, just so I don't lose the thread on that?
That's a great question. I have.
Yeah. Sometimes we get so acronymy, we don't even know what they mean. I've been there.
Comprehensive Operations Analysis. That's right.
Very good. And what's Human Transit? You mentioned this guy I guess he wrote a book. I'm super familiar with this. So forgive me. Yeah.
Yeah, Jarrett Walker is kind of a well-known transit advocate. He's been in the space for, I frankly, longer than I've been alive. And he's a big name because he thinks about things. He encourages folks to think about things very differently. He encourages it to think at the human level, like I was mentioning, when I have to go around to get to my bus stop. He thinks about those things and he goes, well, wait a second. If the bus doesn't run at 9:00 at night, and you know that you've got a factory that employs 10% of the city's population, and their shift runs till 10. Let's think about the human element here and connect it better. And so he's a big advocate for frequency over kind of absolute service. And I'm a huge supporter as well. I live off the 104. I love the 104. It comes once an hour. That's impossible to build a life around. If I'm running up the street to my mailbox for my campaign, it's, I wait the hour, I catch it, I go up, and then I'm visiting my mailbox for an hour because that's how long until a bus runs the other way, right? And so Jarrett Walker has this really great philosophy about how we're going to connect services, focusing on boosting ridership as kind of a primary North Star. We'll see. We'll see exactly what the report says. I'm not going to make any commitments until I obviously have a chance to read it and review the final version, but I'm optimistic it's going to really, specifically for Brighton, Brighton gets kind of screwed under our current project. And I'm really optimistic that this will give them better connection. Right now, it's a pain. I mean, it is a real pain to get from Brighton to the end line. And I think that that's such an obvious solution to me. I don't know why we run a bus from Brighton next to the end line all the way to Denver without making it really easy to connect those two. That's a big priority for me that I want to change in this operational analysis.
All right, so like now let's just blow the doors off in dreaming and scheming. Like you've got a
All right.
magic wand. Like you can do anything you want,
So
regardless of cost, regardless of practicality. What design the perfect RTD? Like what does it really look like to have like a Denver metro area public transit system that works the way it should? What does it cost? What does it look like? Who's in? Go nuts.
that's a outstanding question. I like to ask myself, one of the lines I like to say is, what would happen if instead of $1 billion annual budget, RTD had a $2 billion annual budget? What if our budget doubled? And I think the first thing is, if we have that much revenue, I think we do things like make fares free on buses, especially. It makes it more accessible. It reduces the amount of friction on some of these systems, and it lets us invest in other areas. The consequences, we're going to have to do a little bit more policing. Policing's the wrong word. We're going to have to do a little more enforcement of social norms. You're not allowed to smoke on the train, and the fact that you didn't pay a fare doesn't mean you still get to smoke on the train, right? But I think that's the big one. We do something like free fares. We build out the N line, the B line, the G line, all to completion. We run that train not just to we run the FRPR not just to Fort Collins, but we run it to Cheyenne, and we run it down south, not just to Pueblo, but we run it to Albuquerque, and we connect all three of these along the the greater Front Range. We build out mountain rail and connect it into the system. We run FRPR, but we also keep things like the Flatiron Flyer. We do an equivalent Flatiron Flyer to places, it's going to be called the Diagonal Flyer, to places like Longmont. We run the N line up, and instead of finishing the N line at Highway 87 like it's proposed, we do what's called 2014 option 2, where we run it up and around. We run it through Erie. We put an Erie stop on the N line, and then we run the N line all the way up to Longmont and connect them to. And so you have not one, but two options on trains and connect our communities. You build out service in Aurora, and then Aurora, if in a perfect world, Aurora stops being a pill on transit signal priority, and they stop putting my trains at stoplights. And so we either elevate the rail and we run it over, or we kind of grade separate our entire rail system. In a perfect world where I get to spend, $5 billion, the cost of the Iranian war for 3 days. That's what I could do in a transit system here in Colorado.
Well, I love that you've already thought about that. Yeah, that's great. Keep going.
And then, if we really do have a huge budget like that, projects like Colfax just look so much different. When we do Colfax BRT has been a little bit of a boondoggle, to use an appropriate word. And I think that we're going to do another BRT on Federal. Frankly, I think the city, who has handled the construction project, I want to be really clear with that. I think the city should learn a lot of lessons about how to do this and how to go about it. If we have more money, I think we try to do a better job subsidizing those businesses to make sure that they're stable for that time. We've lost a lot of goodwill due to the Colfax BRT project. The market's crummy anyway. Small businesses are closing up here in Commerce City too, and they're nowhere near Colfax.
Right.
But I think that if we look at that and we do that, and also just we build out faster. Oh, and last thing, if I have like an infinite budget, I'm electrifying our fleet. I'm moving to EVs. That's so amazing for emissions. It's such a smoother ride. I don't know if you've ever ridden in an EV bus. You don't realize how much you feel on a diesel bus until you've ridden on an EV.
No, I guess I didn't.
Yeah. It's really neat. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll have to make a point of taking one. You mentioned the RTD CEO, Deborah Johnson, announced her departure back in April. If you're part of the committee hiring her replacement, what do you look for in the next CEO?
I think fundamentally what's next needs to be someone with some familiarity with Colorado. We have one of the largest.
That's what you
districts.
meant by her and Phil Washington. They're from elsewhere.
Yeah.
They don't really understand the city. Is that the implication?
I think so. I also think that their experience was in a smaller project. RTD's district is 2,200 square miles. We have an RTD district that is, and by population, the RTD district is 1.4 million people. You can fit two Wyomings by population in the RTD district. This is fundamentally just a very unique transit district. We have places like Niwot in the district. We have very, very rural areas in ostensibly a large metro transit district that includes a major city, right? And I think that's where it's really tough. I'd like to see someone with a little bit of understanding on the Colorado political arena, for lack of a better word. We have an almost entirely new leadership team coming in for the state of Colorado. We've got a new treasurer, we've got a new secretary of state, we've got a new governor. All of those things kind of give RTD a unique chance to reset its relationships. I will be frank, that's a big part of the reason I think that I'm valuable for the board right now, is I have a relationship with many of those folks. I am confident that I can work with people like soon to be Governor Weiser, to get transit projects finished. And that's it's a reset, right? I think that we need someone who knows their way around the political scene in Colorado. And then second of all, I think we need to hire someone who has some understanding with government experience. I That is such a unique role that I think it's going to be tough to find someone. And then my dream, my preferred but not required qualification would be Tabor familiarity.
Makes the list, down to 3 human beings that actually exist on this planet Earth. Right?
Exactly. And so I think the general counsel for RTD has a lot of familiarity with Tabor, and that's a huge asset. They bring a lot of familiarity, and it really helps. But I really worry about having leadership who doesn't. The CFO right now, who I like, doesn't have any Tabor experience. She's from private sector. She doesn't have a lot of government experience, and that's fine. But I think we need to be really cognizant as we make some of those senior leadership decisions that we make sure we have Tabor familiarity. I think that was a big challenge in the early 2010s, is that we accidentally hired a few folks who didn't have a lot of Tabor familiarity, and it put us in a tough spot where debrucing, I think we took longer to debruce than I would have personally gone for. I would have tried to debruce earlier in a perfect world.
So it's sort of the opposite question. Are there any other similarly sized cities whose transportation systems we should look to as models for RTD? I mean, we talked about DC, we talked about New York. I think DC is comparable, but still bigger. New York obviously is not. What can we learn from other systems where they're doing it right or doing it well that we can import into our size and quality here?
That's an excellent question. One of the challenges is that our transit system is big and our city is not, and then vice versa as well. We have a transit system that geographically is huge. Population-wise is pretty big, but the actual city it's not New York, right? It's not as dense. Right. We have a very rural transit district, and so I think that's something we have to look at. I do think that places like San Francisco are a really good model for how to handle some of our heavy rail and some of our intergovernmental relationships, because it is a larger geographic agency. BART's Bay Area, it includes Oakland and San Francisco. I think that that's different, and I think we should look to them for how that works. And then I think, places like Salt Lake are actually a good example of thinking about, all right, how do we deal with the mountainous terrain? A lot of people come to me and they go, Michael, I really want to build a subway. Me too. The subway was kind of foreclosed about 1,000 years ago when when the mountains shifted.
Right.
And so I think that that's a big factor for me as well. But I do think like Sound up in Seattle is a good example of doing kind of both rail and bus as well. And then I think looking at Utah is a good example of, all right, how do we run buses in a way that really maximizes ridership and puts that as a North Star? They've had a really amazing post-COVID recovery, and I think that we have a lot to learn from them. I think that, frankly, that's RTD's biggest issue in the last 5 years. Is our post-COVID recovery has been really difficult. Looking to other similarly sized cities that are also very suburban communities like Utah is a good choice, I think.
Well, Michael Farrington, I have learned a lot through this conversation, and I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk today. If people want to get involved in the campaign, learn more about you, where do they see you online? What are your platforms? Give us your handles. Where do they find you on the internet?
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about me and kind of my campaign, you can look at michaelforrtd.com. You can also check out my social media at Mike4Co, Mike4Co on Instagram and Facebook. On TikTok, I'm Mike from Co. So I'm kind of wherever platform you're a fan of. But the best place to find out about me and about the election and about the issues facing RTD is michaelforrtd.com. Thank you so much for the invitation, Ian. It's been really great to join you.
Oh, we had such a nice time. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I got more smarter. I hope you did too, even though you were doing most of the talking. And really appreciate you stopping by today. Michael Farrington, running for RTD District K. Is that how I say it?
District K. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the Get More Smarter podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.